Carl Jung believed that one of the greatest obstacles to personal growth is the failure to transition from childhood into true adulthood. Many people remain psychologically immature, what he might call the puer aeternus, or eternal child, unable to face the responsibilities, challenges, and sacrifices necessary for individuation. In this video, we'll explore Jung's insights into the child-man problem, how it manifests in modern society, and what it takes to break free from perpetual adolescence. Carl Jung's concept of the eternal child, or puer aeternus, represents a psychological state in which a person remains forever in the realm of childhood, refusing to mature and assume adult responsibilities. This is not merely a case of youthful energy or playfulness, but a deep-seated psychological pattern that prevents the person from fully embracing adulthood. The puer aeternus is someone who clings to the idealized notion of eternal youth, resisting the burdens of life that come with age, such as work, relationships, and self-reflection. They fear the loss of freedom, spontaneity, and the carefree nature that youth symbolizes. The puer aeternus is often seen as charming, energetic, and endlessly creative, but these traits mask an underlying fear of facing the harsh realities of life. Individuals who embody this archetype are often driven by the desire to avoid the constraints that adulthood demands. This manifests in their avoidance of responsibility, a tendency to indulge in escapism through substances, entertainment, or fantasy, and a general unwillingness to engage in the necessary challenges of personal growth. They may start many projects, but fail to finish them, leave relationships unresolved, or avoid confronting their deepest emotional issues. In Jungian terms, this is an example of someone who is stuck in the pure stage of development, unable to mature into the full potential of their adulthood. The problem lies in a failure to individuate. Individuation, for Jung, is the process of integrating all aspects of the self, both the conscious and unconscious, into a cohesive, mature personality. It involves confronting one's own shadow, embracing the difficult parts of oneself, and becoming fully aware of one's capacity for both good and evil. The puer aeternus, however, resists this process, instead clinging to a superficial idea of selfhood. In resisting the demands of life, they fail to experience the richness of growth, with its necessary struggles and eventual victories. True adulthood requires us to accept the inevitability of suffering, the reality of limitation, and the reality of death itself. The puer aeternus fears these truths and thus remains in a state of arrested development. Jung believed that the child archetype, if not properly integrated into adulthood, could distort a person's sense of self and the world around them. The puer's refusal to grow up creates a deep internal conflict. On the one hand, they crave the security and emotional stability that adulthood can offer. On the other hand, they fear the loss of the childlike joy and idealism they associate with youth. This internal struggle can create feelings of confusion, anxiety, and alienation. Without the ability to grow, they can feel stuck, as though their potential is never fully realized. The puer aeternus thus represents not only the idealization of childhood, but also the avoidance of the painful but necessary journey into true adulthood. The modern world only exacerbates this issue. With the rise of technology, entertainment, and social media, the boundary between adulthood and childhood is increasingly blurred. In a culture where distractions are ubiquitous, many are drawn into the fantasy of perpetual youth. The puer aeternus is often celebrated in popular culture as the free spirit, the artistic genius, the charismatic wanderer, figures who embody the idea of eternal youth and freedom. But this cultural idealization masks the underlying problem: the failure to grow, to evolve, and to face life's complexities. Instead of encouraging personal responsibility and growth, society tends to reward the puer aeternus with admiration for their ability to remain young in spirit, even at the expense of their own development. One of the central themes in Jungian psychology is the idea of the mother complex, which plays a crucial role in the development, or lack thereof, of the child man. The mother complex refers to the unconscious patterns, expectations, and influences associated with the mother figure in a person's life. For men, this often manifests in a dependence on maternal figures, whether in the form of an overbearing mother, a permissive mother, or an emotionally distant one. The child man, or puer aeternus, is particularly vulnerable to the mother complex because they have not yet learned how to stand on their own, how to separate from the mother in a healthy way, or how to integrate their own individuality into their life. An overprotective or indulgent mother figure can contribute to a man's failure to mature. When a child is not required to face challenges or learn to overcome obstacles on their own, they are deprived of the opportunity to develop resilience, independence, and self-reliance. In such cases, the child man grows up without the internal resources to confront the difficulties of life. They expect the world to provide for them in the same way their mother did, nurturing, protecting, and solving their problems. This leads to a deep sense of insecurity and a lack of confidence in their ability to function independently. In other instances, the mother complex manifests in a relationship of emotional dependency. A child man may seek out relationships where they are constantly cared for or nurtured, often without reciprocating the same level of emotional maturity. This creates an unhealthy dynamic in which the individual never learns to take responsibility for their own emotional well-being or to form truly reciprocal adult relationships. Instead of transitioning from the childhood dependence on the mother to an adult relationship, the puer remains stuck in a state of infantilization, always seeking someone to take care of them. The fear of responsibility is at the heart of the child man's struggles. Taking on responsibility, whether for one's own life, decisions, or relationships, forces the individual to acknowledge the limitations and difficulties inherent in existence. Responsibility requires us to face the reality of our own flaws, to sacrifice our immediate desires for the sake of long-term goals, and to accept that life will never be entirely free from pain and hardship. This is something the child man cannot fully confront. The child man might fear that by embracing responsibility, they will lose their freedom or their sense of joy. In avoiding the heaviness of adulthood, they miss out on the depth and satisfaction that come with it. The satisfaction of creating something meaningful, contributing to society, and forming mature, fulfilling relationships. This resistance to responsibility is not just an individual problem, it's a societal issue as well. In a world where instant gratification is easily accessible, the demand for personal accountability has diminished. Many are caught in a cycle of avoidance, choosing comfort and convenience over the hard work and emotional growth that lead to true maturity. The child man, in this sense, is not simply an isolated figure but a symptom of a larger cultural phenomenon that prioritizes pleasure over discipline, consumption over creation, and escapism over facing the challenges of life head-on. To truly break free from the puer aeternus state, individuals must confront their fear of responsibility. They must willingly embrace the struggles and sacrifices that come with adulthood and recognize that growth often comes with pain. In doing so, they move toward a more integrated and whole version of themselves, one that transcends the limitations of the child man and enters the realm of true individuation. The path to adulthood is not an easy one. but it is the only path that leads to genuine fulfillment, maturity, and the realization of one's full potential. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, represents the unconscious aspects of ourselves that we reject, repress, or fail to integrate into our conscious identity. For the child man, the shadow is often shaped by the refusal to confront the darker, more difficult aspects of life, such as responsibility, aging, and suffering. The child man avoids these uncomfortable truths by clinging to the idealized, carefree notion of eternal youth, which prevents him from embracing the full spectrum of his emotional and psychological experience. When an individual refuses to grow up or mature, they often suppress the parts of themselves that don't fit into their idealized image of who they wish to be. For the child man, this typically manifests as an avoidance of anything that requires discipline, structure, or facing the challenges that come with adulthood. They might feel a deep sense of resentment or unease about the idea of growing older, taking on responsibilities, or confronting the pain that is inevitable in life. Rather than confronting these fears directly, they project them onto others or attempt to ignore them altogether. This avoidance creates a shadow self, an unconscious collection of denied aspects that lurks beneath the surface, influencing the child man's thoughts, actions, and relationships. The shadow may take the form of fear, shame, or even rage, but because it is repressed, it remains largely invisible to the individual. The child man's refusal to mature prevents them from recognizing their own shadow, and this lack of self-awareness leads to emotional instability and unconscious behavior. The child man's fear of the shadow is rooted in the belief that confronting the darker aspects of life means the loss of youthful vitality and joy. For them, growing up means giving up spontaneity, freedom, and creativity. These individuals often live in a state of denial, refusing to accept the inevitability of change, pain, and aging. As a result, they remain disconnected from the wisdom that comes with life's difficulties. The shadow is often where the true power of transformation lies. It is within the darker, rejected parts of ourselves that we can find the opportunity for growth and integration. But the child man, terrified of losing his sense of freedom and joy, avoids this necessary confrontation. Another aspect of the shadow of the child man is his deep-seated resentment. Jung believed that the refusal to face the hardships of life leads to a form of unconscious rebellion against the constraints and responsibilities that adulthood demands. The child man might feel angry, though unaware of the true source of their frustration. They resent the expectations placed upon them by society, family, or even themselves. This resentment, when left unchecked, festers in the unconscious and can lead to passive-aggressive behaviors, self-sabotage, or destructive patterns in relationships. The anger that the child man feels about the loss of his youthful innocence becomes projected onto others, often manifesting as bitterness toward those who embrace responsibility or maturity. This sense of resentment is a direct manifestation of the child man's refusal to mature, and it poisons their relationships, both with themselves and others. The avoidance of the shadow also means that the child man is unable to access the full potential of his psyche. Jung believed that the process of individuation, the integration of the conscious and unconscious aspects of the self, is essential for psychological health and maturity. In order to individuate, one must confront their shadow and accept the hidden, darker parts of themselves. This process is uncomfortable and often painful, but it leads to a more authentic, whole sense of self. For the child man, however, this process is terrifying because it involves facing the parts of themselves that they have spent a lifetime avoiding. The avoidance of the shadow also leads to emotional and psychological fragmentation. Because the child man is unable or unwilling to integrate his darker traits, he often lives in a state of internal conflict. There is a disconnect between the image of himself that he wishes to present to the world and the reality of his internal experience. He may appear charismatic, energetic, and free-spirited on the outside, but on the inside, there is often a sense of chaos, disillusionment, and internal fragmentation. This sense of fragmentation is exacerbated by the child man's refusal to take responsibility for his own life and actions. He may blame external circumstances or other people for his dissatisfaction, rather than looking inward to examine how his own avoidance of responsibility and maturity contributes to his problems. The resentment and frustration that arise from avoiding the shadow are often directed outward, leading the child man to adopt an attitude of cynicism and detachment. The world becomes an unfair place, filled with rules and limitations that stifle creativity and freedom. The child man may see himself as an outsider, someone who is too sensitive or misunderstood to fully participate in the adult world. But this detachment is another form of avoidance, an unwillingness to engage with the reality of adulthood, to face the difficulties and challenges that come with it. The more the child man withdraws into this cynical, detached state, the more disconnected he becomes from his own authentic feelings and desires. At the heart of the shadow lies the fear of losing one's sense of self. The child man fears that by growing up, they will lose the creative, spontaneous, and joyful qualities of their younger self. This fear is rooted in the belief that adulthood equals the loss of freedom and joy. But in truth, embracing adulthood does not mean abandoning creativity or spontaneity. It means integrating these aspects of the self into a more mature, responsible framework. It is only by facing the shadow that the child man can transcend the limitations of his immaturity and discover the deeper, more authentic aspects of himself. The shadow also contains untapped potential. By refusing to engage with it, the child man misses out on the possibility of personal transformation. The journey of individuation, which requires integrating both the light and dark aspects of the self, leads to a more balanced, empowered individual. The child man, however, remains stuck in a state of inner conflict, unable to embrace the full potential of his own psyche. Only by confronting the shadow, by acknowledging and accepting the darker, repressed parts of the self, can the child man hope to evolve into a more whole and mature individual. In the process of confronting the shadow, the child man may also encounter deep emotional pain. The unconscious parts of the self that have been repressed may contain unresolved trauma, fear, or shame. For the child man, facing these painful emotions is a daunting task. But it is through this confrontation that true healing can occur. The fear of the shadow often prevents the individual from recognizing that the pain of confronting it is far less damaging than the emotional and psychological cost of continued avoidance. Only through the willingness to face the shadow can the individual transcend the cycle of immaturity and move toward true adulthood. The integration of the shadow is not a one-time event, but a continuous process that leads to greater emotional maturity, self-awareness, and a more fulfilling life. The modern world presents a host of challenges that exacerbate the problem of psychological immaturity, and perhaps no group embodies this struggle more clearly than the child man. Today, many men find themselves caught in a cycle of perpetual adolescence, a state in which the demands of adulthood feel overwhelming, and the distractions of modern life provide a constant escape from responsibility. In a world that increasingly values instant gratification, comfort, and external validation, the pressure to mature and take on adult responsibilities is minimized, making it easier for the child man to avoid the inevitable challenges of growth. Technology, consumerism, and social media are perhaps the most pervasive influences in creating this infantilization. The modern world provides a multitude of distractions that keep individuals, particularly men, from confronting the deep, existential questions of life. The endless stream of entertainment, digital content, and online personas offer a constant escape from the hard work and emotional labor required to face life's challenges. When everything from entertainment to social interactions can be delivered instantly and with minimal effort, the impulse to avoid confronting life's more demanding aspects becomes overwhelming. The result is that many people remain in a state of arrested development, never fully stepping into the roles and responsibilities expected of mature adults. For the child man, this environment is both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, modern society's emphasis on convenience and consumerism allows them to escape the challenges of responsibility. They can indulge in endless entertainment, social media, and other distractions without having to confront the painful, inevitable aspects of life, such as aging, loss, or the responsibility of raising a family, pursuing meaningful work, or taking care of their emotional well-being. This cycle of escapism becomes self-reinforcing. The more the child man indulges in these distractions, the more disconnected they become from their true potential as an adult. One of the most profound ways in which modern society infantilizes men is through the increasing reliance on technology. The rise of social media, video games, and the constant bombardment of information create an environment in which individuals, especially young men, can avoid real-life challenges by immersing themselves in virtual realities. For many men, social media offers an instant outlet for approval and validation, allowing them to build a curated online persona that is disconnected from the complexities of real life. This online life often feels more manageable and more rewarding than the uncertainties and responsibilities of the real world, making it all the more tempting for the child man to retreat into this artificial realm. The omnipresence of consumer culture further reinforces this tendency toward immaturity. Modern advertising and the consumer economy are built on the idea that happiness, freedom, and fulfillment are products to be bought, and this ideal is particularly appealing to the child man. The child man, who is often unable or unwilling to engage in the hard work of self-reflection or personal growth, may turn to material possessions, fleeting pleasures, or external validation to fill the void. In doing so, they avoid confronting the deeper existential questions that life inevitably presents. The child man may accumulate possessions, chase after status symbols, or indulge in instant gratification, all in an attempt to stave off the discomfort of facing the responsibilities and hardships of adulthood. But these distractions are ultimately empty, offering only short-term relief before the inevitable return of existential dissatisfaction. Consumerism also plays a role in promoting a culture of dependency. As the child man refuses to take on the responsibilities of adulthood, he may look to external sources, family, friends, or society, to provide for him. This dependency is reinforced by the comfort and convenience provided by modern consumer culture. Everything from fast food to on-demand streaming services creates a sense of instant gratification, where individuals can have their desires met without putting in the effort required to truly understand themselves or the world around them. The ease with which modern life caters to individual wants and needs makes it even more difficult for the child man to break free from his avoidance of responsibility. The more dependent he becomes on external sources for comfort, entertainment, and validation, the harder it is for him to develop the emotional maturity and resilience needed to face life's challenges. In addition to consumerism and technology, the child man is also influenced by the cultural shift toward avoiding discomfort and adversity. Modern society, especially in Western cultures, places a significant emphasis on avoiding pain, difficulty, and unpleasant emotions. This cultural shift encourages individuals to seek out pleasure and comfort, often at the expense of emotional resilience and psychological growth. The ideal of happiness as the ultimate goal of life has led many to believe that the pursuit of joy should be constant and without struggle. For the child man, this cultural emphasis on comfort reinforces the belief that life should be free from difficulty and responsibility. When life inevitably presents challenges, whether in relationships, career, or personal development, the child man retreats further into avoidance and escapism, unable or unwilling to face the discomfort necessary for growth. This cultural environment has also altered the way men are socialized and the expectations placed upon them. Traditional markers of adulthood, such as taking on family responsibilities, providing for oneself, and contributing to society, are often sidelined in favor of pursuing personal pleasure and gratification. This shift in values has created an environment in which men are increasingly reluctant to take on the weight of responsibility. Instead of being expected to step into mature roles within the family, career, and society, many men are encouraged to remain young at heart and stay true to themselves. While these qualities can be positive, they can also foster a refusal to grow up, leading to the perpetuation of the child man's immaturity. The impact of this cultural infantilization is felt deeply in relationships as well. As the child man resists maturation, he often struggles to form healthy, mature connections with others. His reluctance to take responsibility for his own emotional well-being means he may constantly seek out others to care for him, either emotionally or financially. This creates an imbalance in relationships, where the child man remains dependent, unable to fully contribute to the partnership. His partner may find themselves constantly picking up the slack, leading to frustration and resentment. The child man may, in turn, blame others for his dissatisfaction, never recognizing that his own unwillingness to face responsibility and mature is the root cause of the dysfunction. This perpetual immaturity also hampers the child man's ability to contribute meaningfully to society. Maturity is not only about personal development, it also involves contributing to the collective good. The child man, however, is often disconnected from this responsibility. He may seek out careers or lifestyles that provide the least amount of effort or the least amount of commitment, avoiding jobs or roles that require deep engagement or long-term dedication. He may be more focused on achieving superficial success or personal comfort than on contributing to something greater than himself. This detachment from the collective well-being further isolates the child man and keeps him stuck in a cycle of self-indulgence and immaturity. Breaking free from the cycle of infantilization is not easy. It requires a deep, conscious effort to confront the fear of responsibility and to embrace the challenges of adulthood. In order to mature, the child man must first recognize the ways in which society, technology, and consumer culture have reinforced his immaturity. He must then take the difficult step of stepping away from the distractions and comforts that keep him stuck in a state of avoidance. This process involves not only confronting the shadow and embracing responsibility, but also finding a deeper sense of meaning and purpose beyond the superficial distractions of modern life. The modern world, with all of its distractions and comforts, may make it more difficult for individuals to mature, but it also presents an opportunity for those willing to confront these challenges and grow. In doing so, they can transcend the limitations of the child man and embrace the fullness of life's complexity and potential. As Jungian psychology reveals, the process of individuation is integral to psychological maturity, a journey toward wholeness and self-realization. However, the child man is often at odds with this process, avoiding or resisting the painful yet transformative steps necessary to achieve a deeper, more integrated self. For the child man, the path to individuation seems too daunting and fraught with discomfort. The fear of facing one's inner conflicts and the unconscious forces that drive behavior keeps him in a state of arrested development, preventing him from fully stepping into his power as an adult. Instead of confronting the realities of his psychological landscape, he often seeks refuge in external distractions, the comforts of consumerism, or the fleeting pleasures of technology. The refusal to engage with the depths of the psyche is, in many ways, a refusal to grow. The child man's fear of individuation is rooted in the belief that it demands a loss of the freedom and joy associated with youth. To individuate means to face the self in its entirety, which includes both light and dark aspects, the parts of the personality that are repressed, denied, or disowned. For the child man, this process feels like a surrender of the spontaneous, carefree life that he clings to so tightly. Yet, the reality is that the process of individuation, while challenging, leads not to the death of joy, but to a more profound and authentic experience of it. To mature is not to relinquish creativity, freedom, or vitality, but to integrate them into a more grounded, meaningful existence. The child man, however, fears that the loss of his youthful sense of self would mean the extinguishment of these qualities altogether. At the heart of individuation is the need to confront one's shadow, the unconscious aspects of the self that are repressed or ignored. For the child man, these shadow aspects often include the very qualities that represent adulthood: responsibility, discipline, vulnerability, and emotional depth. These qualities, which are often perceived as burdensome or limiting by the child man, are in fact the very components that facilitate maturity and growth. The child man's refusal to face these aspects keeps him from fully understanding his own psyche, and by extension, his own potential. The shadow, then, is not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be integrated into the conscious personality. The child man's reluctance to confront his shadow is often accompanied by a form of narcissism, the tendency to over-identify with a particular image of self and avoid any confrontation with the less flattering or more difficult aspects of the psyche. This narcissism stems from the desire to maintain a sense of invulnerability and control. By clinging to an idealized self-image, the child man avoids the vulnerability that comes with recognizing and embracing his imperfections. However, this narcissistic defense only serves to isolate him further from the truth of his own being. The refusal to acknowledge his flaws, weaknesses, and fears keeps him stuck in a superficial version of reality, unable to experience the depth of life's emotional and psychological experiences. As the child man continues to avoid the process of individuation, his relationships with others are often marked by emotional immaturity and dependence. The child man may seek out relationships where he can avoid responsibility or expect others to take care of him, both emotionally and practically. These relationships are often characterized by a lack of reciprocity. He gives little in return for the support and care he receives. In many cases, the child man may also idealize his partner or others, placing them on a pedestal and expecting them to provide the emotional nurturing he is unwilling or unable to provide for himself. This creates a dynamic of emotional dependency, where the child man's sense of self-worth and happiness becomes tied to the approval and validation of others. In this way, the child man continues to avoid the difficult work of self-acceptance and self-empowerment that individuation requires. The avoidance of individuation also leads to a sense of existential dissatisfaction. The child man may achieve success in external terms, career achievements, financial stability, or social recognition, but still feel empty and unfulfilled on a deeper level. This sense of emptiness stems from the fact that he has not fully embraced his true self. The child man's focus on external validation and success distracts him from the internal work necessary for genuine fulfillment. In order to experience true satisfaction and meaning, the child man must turn inward and begin the process of self-discovery. This means acknowledging the parts of himself that he has neglected or avoided, and integrating them into a more complete and balanced sense of self. One of the key components of individuation is the development of a strong, authentic relationship with the unconscious. For the child man, this relationship is often hindered by the fear of confronting the parts of himself that remain hidden. The unconscious contains not only the shadow, but also the deeper layers of the psyche, including the archetypes that shape our behavior and beliefs. Archetypes are universal patterns of thought and behavior that arise from the collective unconscious and influence how we experience the world. The child man, however, is often disconnected from these deeper layers of the self as he continues to live on the surface, avoiding the uncomfortable depths of his own psyche. This disconnection prevents him from accessing the full range of his potential and limits his ability to achieve psychological wholeness. The process of individuation involves embracing both the light and the dark aspects of the self. This includes accepting one's limitations, flaws, and vulnerabilities, as well as recognizing the strengths, talents, and potential that lie within. For the child man, this is a difficult task. It requires letting go of the illusion of perfection and accepting that life is messy, complex, and filled with both joy and suffering. To individuate is to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, including the inevitable challenges and hardships that come with maturity. It is only by accepting this reality that the child man can begin to move beyond his fear of growing up and start the journey toward psychological wholeness. The journey of individuation also requires the child man to develop a sense of inner authority. In order to mature, the child man must learn to trust his own instincts, judgment, and values, rather than relying on external sources for validation. This process involves developing a deeper sense of self-awareness and self-reliance. As the child man begins to confront his fears, insecurities, and repressed desires, he starts to understand himself on a more profound level. This self-awareness allows him to take ownership of his life and make decisions based on his own values and principles, rather than on the expectations or opinions of others. The refusal to individuate, on the other hand, leads to a life of stagnation and frustration. The child man, unable or unwilling to face his unconscious material, remains trapped in a cycle of self-deception and avoidance. This stagnation often manifests as a sense of chronic dissatisfaction, a feeling that life is lacking in meaning or purpose. The child man may experience periods of intense frustration, depression, or anxiety as he grapples with the realization that his life is not fulfilling his deepest needs. But because he refuses to engage with the painful but necessary process of individuation, he remains stuck in this cycle of dissatisfaction. Ultimately, the journey of individuation is a process of integrating all aspects of the self, both the conscious and unconscious, the light and the dark. For the child man, this journey is daunting and fraught with challenges, but it is also the only path to true fulfillment and maturity. By facing the fears and uncertainties that accompany adulthood, the child man can begin to develop a more authentic, grounded sense of self. Through the process of individuation, he can reclaim his personal power and achieve a deeper sense of meaning, purpose, and emotional satisfaction. The refusal to grow up, to face the shadow, and to embrace the full spectrum of life's experiences ultimately keeps the child man trapped in a state of perpetual adolescence. But the courage to engage with this process of self-discovery can lead to a more mature, integrated, and fulfilling life.